Gordie Howe died today at 88 years old. He'd been sick for several years. Gordie Howe had the package, unbelievable talent and strength and meanness, and there's never been a player like Gordie Howe in terms of those three attributes. And in his heyday, he could score goals. He had the record for the most goals until Wayne Gretzky broke it. And if you wanted to mess with Gordie Howe, you often ended up in the hospital. And you can't say that about today's National Hockey League player. They're either a scorer or a tough guy, but they're not both. And in Gordie's case, he was also, I believe, a freak of nature. He was still playing hockey in his 40s in the World Hockey Association. That's where we got to see him as fans in Edmonton when he was playing with his boys Mark and Marty for the Houston Aeros. And there was one famous moment late in the WHA when the WHA All-Stars played the Russian hockey team Moscow Dynamo, and Gordie Howe, Mark Howe, his son, and Wayne Gretzky played in the same line. And you know, Wayne was 17 or 18 then, and Gordie was in his almost 50, and Mark was, you know, just a shade older than Wayne. But that was a memory that Wayne cherishes, I know. And Bruce McGregor, the former Oiler assistant general manager, played almost around 600 games with Gordie Howe in Detroit, seventh most of any player who ever played. And he had, as Bruce says, a ringside seat for what he considered the greatest player who ever lived. The strongest player. He related a story, his hands being so big that when the two boys, Mark and Marty, would come to the dressing room when they were little, Gordie could pick both up, put his hands on top of their head and pick them both up, one in one hand, one in the other. He was so strong. And Al Hamilton, whose number is retired at Rexall Place, number 3, was telling me this morning that his first National Hockey League game was against Gordie Howe. Gordie Howe broke his stick over his arm and broke Al Hamilton's arm at the same time. So Al was 19 years old, and as Al said, that was my introduction to the National Hockey League, from the player that I considered the greatest player ever when I was growing up. In fact, my first pair of skates were Gordie Howe signatures from Eaton's. He said his parents had ordered when he was 9 years old and living in Flin Flon. So lots of great memories, and I have one myself, if I'm allowed to relate that. I was 12 years old. Living in Winnipeg then. My father was a sports editor of the Winnipeg Tribune, and Gordie was working for Eaton's, going across the country on speaking engagements. He wanted to play golf one day, and my dad was doing a story, and Gordie was looking for a caddy at the St. Charles Golf and Country Club in Winnipeg, and my father volunteered me, and I carried Gordie's bag for 18 holes, and Gordie played so well he wanted to play another 18 holes. And I remember thinking, I was only 12 and that bag was awful heavy, and while he was a legend and my hero, I wasn't sure I could get another 18 holes in me, being small. But I go a long way back. That's over 50 years ago that I met Gordie Howe for the first time, and he was a legend to me then. And then fortunately I got to cover him in the World Hockey Association too, so I got to see Gordie as a player, a golfer, and in my case as a 12-year-old, and then somebody much older covering him in the World Hockey Association. He epitomized class off the ice. On the ice he was tough, but off the ice he had a certain image, sold the game greatly, and there are many young players today, including Wayne Gretzky, who revered Gordie Howe. And if Wayne Gretzky, who I think is the greatest player who ever lived, revered Gordie Howe, then Gordie Howe must be something special.